Good morning, Rodney.
Good morning. How are you, Gary?
Doing pretty well. I noticed you did something on TiderInsider.com, which I think is really neat. We do it on our television show. You did a mailbag where you just checked in on some of the questions that you had been asked. And, of course, we take questions, both phone calls and emails. And there are a ton of questions right now. There really are, because there are so many unknowns. And so I kind of want to do that on the radio show this morning, if that's okay with you.
Sounds great. We'll certainly give it our best shot.
Yeah, and some of these are questions that I'm taking from your mailbag. Some are that we've gotten on the television show, and some are my own. But certainly, I think this is a good one that you've covered. And I get questions about it, and I know you do too. And that is just how this situation with the football facility being closed down, no recruiting visits, either official or unofficial, how it is impacting recruiting at Alabama, particularly with the fact that the Crimson Tide only has one commitment for the class of 2021.
Well, of course, obviously this situation is impacting every school. And the good thing is, if you're an Alabama fan, is Nick Saban always creates a plan and sees the big picture in terms of what's important and how to approach it. And so I think right now, as we look at it, Gary, March, once spring practice started, was supposed to start in April. We're going to be big months to bring in top prospects to come in for visits, have an opportunity to spend more time with them, get a better feel for these prospects. They get a better feel for your program. They have an opportunity to watch how practices go. It's just a great opportunity in the recruiting process. That is obviously not happening. You've got spring evaluation period where usually in April and May, college coaches go out, have the opportunity to go to all these schools, visit prospects, watch them practice, get a better feel for them, make evaluations, bring them back. Then you have all the coaches get together and they start, and again, you already have a board, you already have a foundation laid. Let's be clear about that. But you start kind of saying, okay, here's the prospects in my territory that I feel like we need to pursue or we need to evaluate further. All the coaches. And so that helps you. That's a step in the process. Then you have the summer camps in June where a lot of prospects come in. Mm-hmm. You have an opportunity to not only get a better feel for them in terms of them as a person, but you have an opportunity now to watch them on your practice field, see how they move around, see how they respond. All of those things get a better feel for. What we've laid out, these things are all in jeopardy right now. These are big parts of the evaluation process, big parts of determining who you're going to really recruit. So now those things aren't available, it looks like. They're all in jeopardy. We'll see. So I think now, how do these coaches, how are these coaching staffs going to respond to this? How are they going to make their evaluations? Will they spend more time watching film? Probably doing that right now. Spend more time talking to prospects on Skype or whatever it is. Yeah, they're probably doing that right now. Spend more time in the fall watching them in their first 3 or 4 games. They'll probably put even more emphasis on that. And then you have to think, okay, so the prospects who have, visit these schools, get a feel for them, how are they going to respond? Will they make their decisions later than normal? It's very possible. I just think right now there's so many things up in the air in terms of the recruiting that it may get pushed back quite a bit. And I was on another show in Montgomery today, and this has actually crossed my mind, Gary. Mm-hmm. Think about this. Because we really don't know. And again, let's be clear, this is only speculation. All of these kids now, what is it, 75%? I think you may know the number, 75% that sign in December now. Will that impact how many guys sign early? Will some guys wait till later? Will some of the recruiting evaluations and decisions push staffs to sign guys later?
Exactly.
Is it possible? Is it possible? We don't know this. I mean, again, is it possible that maybe the early signing period They don't have it this year and sign in February. You could still have the early enrollees, but you wouldn't sign early. I mean, I think all of this is still up in the air.
It is. Everything's up in the air, and including how they're going to handle spring practice, which is pretty much gone by the wayside, Rodney, at least all the schools, dates that were scheduled for it. Some schools got some practices in because they started earlier. We get this one a lot. What's going to happen with spring practice? Again, we don't know the answer. Rodney, I'm wondering, though, as Nick Saban says it over and over, football is a developmental game. And right now, the players aren't on campus. Yes, they can Skype or do conference calls and emails and texting, and they've got workouts and they've got diet information. Alabama has one of the best staffs in the country, but it's still it's on the player. There's not a coach there to make him work out right now. And I think clearly the players that take this seriously and are in the best shape are going to have the best chance to play. But what if this extends and they're not allowed on campus, right? You couldn't just walk in here, let's say in August, with if this goes through the summer, with no practices under your belt and get ready to play a game in late August or early September, could you? I mean, don't they have to schedule at least some, whether it's a mini camp in June or July for 8 or 10 practices, have some form of workouts and practices before they get to fall camp for the season to be effective for these teams? I
think so. And I think the mini camp suggestion there is great. That's exactly what I was going to say, a mini camp of sorts. We're talking about a spring practice. Well, maybe in June they have, like you said, 8, 10, 12 practices. Whether or not you allow, half of those in shorts and in pads, I don't know how that would all play out. But, yeah, I do think that you have to have something. You do have to have a summer program of conditioning and workouts to prepare these guys to be physically ready. And then you go into camp. There's just so many questions I think have to be worked through. And again, like I just said about the recruiting, everything is up in the air right now. We really don't know what direction it's going to take. And hopefully we will soon. But right now, how do you answer that?
It's tough. The normal advantage that the early enrollees have has been taken away a little bit, although they did get quite a bit of work in. But you'll have more players that were scheduled to come in the summer and then some that would come in, in time for fall camp. We've talked so much about the early enrollees. Rodney, who are some players that are scheduled to come in later as true freshmen that you think could still impact this team this season? Anybody jump out at you?
You know what? Think about this, too. You mentioned that. How about those guys that come in late May? The guys you're talking about, the ones that don't come in early. Now, all of a sudden, if this is delayed, they come in, who knows when they get here? July? They don't really get an opportunity to go through much of the summer programming,
not at all.
Program conditioning and all of that. Possibly. It's in jeopardy. We don't know. But that could really set those guys back. And, the guys that I would think about, one of the questions I think you're referring to in the mailbag was which guy coming in would be the one to watch.
Sure.
Or one to keep an eye on. And based on this recruiting class, and there are several, but I just said, 3 that come to mind. I couldn't just pinpoint one. If I did pinpoint one, the one guy that I really am high on is Timothy Smith, the defensive lineman from Sebastian River, Florida. I think he is going to be a tremendous player. 6'4", 322, great work ethic. His high school coach told me we don't have to push this guy. He's self-motivated. So what does that mean right now? If that's where he is, self-motivated, he's a guy probably that you can count on to be working hard and be prepared, doesn't have to be pushed. So when he comes in, maybe he'll be a step ahead of where maybe others or where you would be otherwise. But Timothy Smith is a guy I think is going to be a fantastic player. I think I mentioned who was the other one? Brian Branch is certainly a guy, a safety out of the state of Georgia. He can play star, which is that nickelback, that fifth DB.
Mm-hmm.
He's a tremendously gifted player in terms of just his feel for the game, his knack. He's a guy that plays wide receiver in high school, so he has a really great feel for all these different positions. He's a great kick return, punt return guy. He is a tremendous player that I think eventually in time, very smart player that I think is going to be really good. And then Quandarius Robinson, and in a way I hated it for Quandarius that, because he was injured early in his senior year. He had started off just so well. And he's 6'4", 220 plus, a guy that is a fabulous athlete, a playmaker. You see guys that are athletes, but this guy's a football playmaker. I mean, he knows how to make plays on the football field, whether it's rushing the passer, batting balls in the air, intercepting passes, stripping kick return guys. He just has a feel. These are guys, to me, that Alabama had been recruiting through the years, that we saw on the defensive side of the ball, that made plays, that were dominant players. To me, these are the kind of kids that have that potential. And so that's really, really promising for the future, in my opinion.
Rodney, with this coronavirus pandemic and with all the players being sent home, as you said, everybody's in the same boat. But for Alabama, there was a strength coach change. Scott Cochran left right in the middle of workouts to go to Georgia. You're bringing in David Ballou and Dr. Matt Ray, who were trying to implement a new program. And then really before they get started good, the athletes leave. And I know they're, putting together programs and correspondence, but they have not even had a chance really to get to know these players. Does that put Alabama, in your opinion, at more of a disadvantage than other schools?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. First of all, the staff, Nick Saban has a big staff in terms of the strength and conditioning, okay? So they had a good support system already in place, whether Cochran's here or not, and that's not taking anything away from Cochran, but the people under him, if you want to kind of phrase it that way, they're well prepared to follow through and bring the players through the end of the strength and conditioning program, the fourth quarter program. So from my understanding is they did a great job. I'm not sure exactly who led that there, but my understanding is that they were well prepared to do what they needed to do. Now, as you move forward, really in some ways, I think this could be a positive for David Ballou and Dr. Ray. And I tell you why, because right now they would be in the middle of spring practice. So I don't really know exactly how much they would have the players right now, obviously some. But I think now that where they are, they're communicating with the players daily. Mm-hmm. They've got a program. Obviously, they can't sit there and observe them in everything they do, but that contact every day, they can work with them, I think, more in terms of the communication part of it and telling them or instructing them on what they need to be doing on a daily basis. Maybe this is something that, these players, the ones that are committed, the ones that will follow the regimen, they can really, make some more headway and be prepared when everything resumes.
All right, let's get to the quarterbacks, which is always the popular subject surrounding Alabama football. Tua's injury certainly impacted last year's team, no doubt about it. And, still playing the what-if game there. But it also gave Jones a chance to come in and play, which he would not have had other than probably in a mop-up role. And he came in and played well, which kind of vaulted him into the favorite status. My question is this: if Tua doesn't get hurt and Mac doesn't play very much other than just, backup role throughout that season, would we view this quarterback competition differently if Mac was quote unquote unproven than we're viewing it now because he had some success after he came in for Tua?
Well, I think, the way we view it and the way Nick Saban and the staff would view it probably, or maybe there's a distance between that, a gap that, they would probably see it a lot differently than we would because they, are with these players all the time. But yeah, as fans, I think we say, hey, listen, he did well in the starts that he had. I thought he did a tremendous job. He had the pick sixes. I get that at Auburn. but I thought he responded really well. He was not intimidated. And the first thing you want to see in your quarterback, to me, the first thing, if you're intimidated, you don't have a chance.
Right.
And I did not sense that in Mac Jones. He had confidence. And when you have that confidence, you've heard Nick Saban say this before. When the quarterback has confidence, what does it do? It rubs off on everyone else. And I think we saw that with Mac Jones. He was very confident against Auburn, did not play scared, was not afraid to cut the ball loose, let it go. And so I was really impressed with Mac Jones and the way he played in that role. Okay. Thought he played pretty well against Michigan too. So he's number one at the pecking order. There's no question about that. Bryce Young, I know a lot of people have talked about him, but we have Talia. We have Paul Tyson. They're certainly in the mix. They both bring qualities, no question about that. They've been in the program now a year, so they've grown a lot. Talia played some, had a touchdown pass in that one of the games later in the season. So he's got some experience. Paul Tyson going through another year in the program because he did go through spring practice last year, you remember. So I'm sure he's certainly matured and developed a lot too. Looked forward to seeing him this spring and what kind of progress he had made. And then everyone's excited. Listen, I know people say some people think it's disrespectful to Mac and Talia and Paul Tyson, but you got a young freshman coming in, Bryce Young. He comes in with a lot of hoopla, and he deserves it because what he did in high school, the way he performed. I think there's no question he's an extraordinarily gifted player. So right now, unfortunately, you don't get to go through spring practice and see all these guys and see how they compete.
Yeah, that's big, Rodney, and that's where I was going to follow up with you on is that I think, unfortunately, if you're one of the younger quarterbacks not having spring ball, I mean, Mac has experience now. I think that could strengthen his case, particularly if we're limited in terms of the amount of work they've done going into fall camp. That's gonna make it even harder to beat out Mac, Rodney, just simply because he has experience, right?
Oh, initially, for sure. Now, the one thing that Mac's just like the rest of them, though. He needs a lot of work. He needs to. This was an opportunity this spring for him to take the bull by the horns, and so he doesn't have that opportunity. He doesn't have the opportunity to get all those reps that he needs as well. Like you said, no question about that. He's got the advantage. The experience. He's performed. He's been on the stage, so he's got that advantage. No question about that. But at the same time, yeah, I would agree with you. Heading into wherever we're headed into. Are we headed into a mini camp? Are we headed into, what are we headed into? August camp, whatever it is. Mac is the guy who's number one. And then, everybody else, we'll just have to see how it plays out. And again, I think the early season, Mac will be very important for Mac Jones. No question about that.
Clearly, again, a lot of uncertainty going forward with what's going to happen with college football. But if it returns, and hopefully sooner rather than later, Alabama will have a lot to prove this year, Rodney. They lost 2 games in the conference last season, which happens rarely. They lost to their, right now at least, on the western side, their 2 biggest rivals, LSU and Auburn. But when you look back at Nick Saban, hasn't had many losses, but in years where they've lost Auburn or they've had a disappointing season by their standards, they usually bounce back huge the next year and had a great season. This should be a motivated football team. And we've discussed this before. Does what happened the season before carry over? But I think that disappointment of last year's season will be a motivating factor for this year's team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. But, last year this time I thought the disappointment at Clemson would be
true.
A motivating factor, and I think it was. But I also think, when you have injuries, when you have defections, when you lose guys, LeBron Ray, who could have been a great contributor, you had a true freshman that you expected to really help you in DJ Dale, and he did, but he was limited because he got injured early. Had some knee issues throughout the season. You lost to Yabi Anoma, who was a guy that I think could have been a really difference maker as a pass rusher, and you lose him for the reasons that you did. And so then you lose the one player on defense that you couldn't lose. Who did we say? We said you can't lose Dylan Moses. I mean, he's the most important guy you've got there. And they lost him. Everything that could have gone wrong probably went wrong for that defense. And you had so many young players on the field. At points, I guess you had 4 or 5 true freshmen starting, depending on the package that they played. So, I mean, this year you should have more experience, obviously. But, again, you're missing out on spring practice and continuing to develop this team. I just think that there are still questions defensively as you head into next year. And then on the offensive side, you did lose Tua, but I think they'll be okay at quarterback. You got a tremendous room of running backs, no question. But, hey, it starts up front, and I think that offensive line can be outstanding, could be one of the best Alabama's had, certainly could be the best since 2012, in my opinion. You got 2 of the best receivers in college football. You got 2 great players, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, and then you've got some other players, John Mechie, Terrell Shavers, Slade Bolden, Xavier Williams. You've got some freshmen coming in, Taiyu Jones-Bell, Trayshawn Holden, Javon Baker. So you've got some numbers there. And you've got this grad transfer tight end who I think is going to be really good, Carl Tucker from North Carolina. You got Forrestall back, Major Tennyson, Jaleel Billingsley is a young player with a lot of ability. So I think offensively, and you've got Sarkisian back. How big is that? Gary, think about this. Think about Georgia. They've got a transfer quarterback who won't go through spring practice now. They've got a new offensive coordinator who can't implement his system now. That's tough for them. Think about LSU and all the losses they have. Joe Brady, Joe Burrow. They lost a lot of their other players on the offense. And I didn't mention Georgia lost 4/5 of their offensive line. So the people around Alabama, some of the top competition, they're facing a lot of issues too. So, again, I think Alabama next year, it'll be interesting to kind of see once everything resumes how this team starts to come together.
Final random question, so to speak, kind of doing a little mailbag with Rodney Orr this morning. Saban, a lot of discussion, going around. We've talked about it before. Sharks in the water, man, wanting to get into Alabama's dynasty and take a hunk out of it, take a chunk out of it. But Saban has always answered the bell, and I got to tell you, Rodney, I don't want to read too much into this, but those PSAs that he released. He looks great. I mean, he looked great. He looked refreshed. And I know he would rather be in the office and he'd rather have players here. But, he might use this as an opportunity, like you said, to rethink some things. He is the best at organizing. And maybe it'll energize him to some degree. And with so much chatter about the end could be near for Saban, I'm not sensing that, and I don't want to, again, this was a PSA, but boy, he looked on point in that video, and whenever football returns to Alabama, how do you think Coach is going to respond?
No, I agree with you on that PSA, or the one I saw. I don't know if he's done more than one, but the one I saw, he was, like you said, it was extremely well done, well delivered, great timing. I mean, I just thought it was really something that Alabama fans, I know, responded to extremely well. Just the way he delivered it was great. But no, I don't think he sits around thinking, I'm near the end or anything. He's thinking about what he's got to do. He's got a process that he follows. Everybody else is thinking about the end. He's thinking about the next step. Again, I think that his focus right now is not, some people say, winning another national championship, stepping down. No, I don't think that's it at all. I think he's coaching, and he's coaching this thing as hard as he can, as long as he can.
I'm with you. All right, great stuff with Rodney this morning. Rodney, we appreciate it. Folks, remember, Tiger Insider TV will continue as well every Tuesday night. We're not going to halt the program on WVUA 23. So we'll have that television show. I've gotten a lot of questions about it. It will continue. Whether Alabama returns athletes to school anytime soon or not, we'll keep going with TITV. And obviously, RodneyTigerInsider.com. The quad's been busy with coronavirus updates And, of course, in the forums, there are different ones, including the famous closed forum where people are still talking football and basketball. But you've been busy at TiderInsider.com, even with what's happening in our country.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the quad, that forum. I'm telling you, Gary, several thousands of posts a day from members. We've got doctors on there who are offering information, analysis of information. There's a lot of really positive things that during this time that people are kind of relaying on that forum and on the quad, which is on Tider Insider, one of our forums. I mean, it's just been amazing. I've kind of become addicted to it, to be honest with you, and I spend most of my time on the All Sports Forum. But, yeah, TiderInsider.com, it's only $48 a year. You can get instant access with your credit card. Admittedly, information is slow right now because of where we are, but I'm telling you, on that quad, it's worth the price alone to be on that quad and follow the information and exchange that's presented there.
It really is. Thanks so much, Rod.
All right, buddy. Take care.